TriStar's webinar. Today we're going to be featuring what's new in Windchill 11, the M030 maintenance build. My name is Bogdan Cudzilo. I'll start the webinar here in about a minute or so. What we're going to do today is go over some of the enhancements in the latest Windchill release. It's going to be primarily focused on just as it applies to CAD data management. There might be a few other things, but we really don't have time to go through the whole release in the other modules. We may do that in the future, but if you're interested, obviously, take a look at our TriStar website. There's more details there on upcoming webinars. Before I start, I also wanted to mention there is a few time-limited offers that you can find on our website, and these are available until September 30th. So if you take a look at the hyperlink listed, you can go in there and see if there's any good deals you can take advantage of before September. So with that said, let's get into today's presentation. What I want to do is I want to talk about some of the enhancements around managing data in Creo, as well as some of the enhancements in the Creo Unite, or managing files from the other CAD software that Creo can open natively, namely from SOLIDWORKS, NX, CATIA. Those are the three ones that are supported so far. We're also going to take a look at some of the enhancements in the Windchill viewer called Creo View. Right now it's at a 4.1 release with M030. PTC is moving away from the maintenance releases for Creo View, so any new maintenance release is going to be a dot release. So the next one is going to be potentially 4.2, 4.3, or 5.0, 5.1, and so on. And similar to some of the other products. So let's get into the presentation. Of course, if you have any questions, feel free to put those into the question and answer box in your GoToMeeting interface. I'll try to get to as many as I can at the end of the presentation. And if you have any questions or things that you want to see further in Windchill 11 in the later releases, by all means, contact your TriStar sales representative, and they'll be happy to arrange meetings and demos that show you the product and other modules as well. So let's take a look at what has been put into Windchill 11 M030. Namely, what are some of the Creo Workgroup Manager enhancements? So one of the things that we find in Windchill 11, this one was put back into Windchill 11 M20, I just wanted to highlight it, was the addition of a new change object icon inside of a workspace. So sometimes you're working on some files and the designer downloads them into their workspace, and then they need to initiate change request, change notice. There is a new icon that's been added to the workspace to do that. So when you select the parts in the workspace and click on the icon, it will automatically add them to the affected items on the changed form. So no need to get out of the workspace and launch a new change notice and do that through the Windchill browser. You can do that directly within the Creo browser. PTC also has put in some additional functionality on how the workspace is displayed. So inside of your workspace, you can now turn on icons and information about any related changes to your CAD models or Windchill parts. So inside of workspace, if you have some items and you update them or you just download them to your workspace, you could turn on a couple of columns that would show you whether that part or that assembly or that drawing is involved in a change, or it's been modified and it's a resulting change that is attached to that part. So you'll also be able to see the related change notice numbers in the column beside that part. Previously, you had to go to the common space or pull up just a regular Windchill browser and look at whether these are undergoing any type of change, or go into the information page of the part and see whether there's any associated changes or not. Another enhancement also has been to give the users the ability to edit promotion requests. So once the promotion request is started, sometimes you need to maybe add some additional objects to it, or maybe remove objects. But typically, if I need to further modify what's on that promotion request, there's this new edit icon available when I'm looking at the promotion request itself. And then I can go in and edit any information. So maybe I forgot to put in some Creo view markups on the part, or I just need to do it later on. I can edit this, obviously with proper access controls and permissions. Not everyone can do this, but I can do that and add any supporting information to that promotion request. PTC also added inside of Creo 4 itself the ability to launch new CAD document action within the UI. So this is similar to if you were doing it within your workspace, not within the Creo file menu. And that's just for the purposes of if you needed to create a specific subtype of a Windchill part, or you needed to use some existing templates or fill out some attributes on that page. This would give you just another way to fill in that information in your directly from your Creo environment. So that button was not there previously. You could just create a new CAD file, and then if you needed to fill out additional details, associate Windchill parts, you need to do that either during the check-in process or within the workspace. So this is only supported in Creo 4. So if you're using Creo 3 and below, you're not going to see that. PTC also added, and this was back in M030 again, this was another option to look at objects within your workspace. And this is quite handy because when I have a lot of parts in the workspace, sometimes I'm just interested in parts that are either top-level assemblies or just drawings, or maybe just parts that don't have any, don't have any parents. They're just single parts. So they're not used in any parent assemblies yet. So sometimes I might want to just filter out and show only those relevant components. So in the past, you had the ability to create table views and sort this table and so on. And if you had hundreds of family tables, they would have to be also displayed in the workspace, so you're just kind of scrolling back and forth to see the parts that you need. Now, there's a new option called, in the view pull down, called as a top level object list. That one will display no family tables. It will display only the relevant parts that are either at the top level or there's no parent relationships present in that workspace. So it's just a way to filter how much items are displayed in the workspace, especially if you're working on a very large assembly with a lot of components that get added to the workspace. So if I set this view and I have a bunch of family table objects in that workspace, they will all disappear. I mean, they'll be in the workspace, they will not be shown. Right? So if I'm creating new parts, if these are library items, I may not need to see them in the workspace. They're required because I need to open these in CAD properly and regenerate my drawings and assemblies. But my workspace doesn't really, I don't really need to see those as I'm working with components in the workspace. So just another way to clean up items within the workspace. It's a bit different than this other feature that PTC introduced in Windchill 11 called the as featured object list. These gave you these little stars, so you can turn these on and off again and only show the items that you want to display in the workspace. Everything else would be hidden. So it's just another layer of displaying objects in the workspace. Some other nice enhancements that will just make the daily interaction with the workspace a lot more pleasant and just eliminating the amount of picks and clicks that users need to do occasionally. You're not going to be creating table columns all the time, but when you do, and when you resize these columns, you can now, there's a save icon that's been added into the workspace. This one was always available in just a standalone web browser when you're changing columns around and turning on and off columns. But now it's available in the workspace, and it will remember the column widths. So if you kind of resize the column to be a certain size and you save that view, it should remember that for the future when you get into that same view. Another thing which I really like, especially for if I'm working with electrical components and I'm creating electrical parts or supplier parts, or even if I'm not on the CAD side but on the Windchill part display side, especially for configurable assemblies, part instances, I can now display the Windchill part icon in the workspace. So previously in my workspace, Windchill only displayed the default gray gear icon for everything. So even if I changed that icon to be something else, one typical example was an end item. Right? An end item has this little blue box beside it to show me that it's a top-level object. Those wouldn't be displayed inside of the workspace as an icon. You could put a column that showed the text that says end item, but now in Windchill 11 M30, you can actually see the proper icon in your workspaces. So we have a few customers who are using different icons for Windchill parts, and this is just nice for the designers to see what type of part that is right within their workspace. PTC also has done some updates to the where used report. So when I go into a part or assembly and I click on the related objects tab, there's a where used table. There's some additional filters that allow me to see the latest where used, but also the default where used option, and also if there are filters that I want to set to show, let's say just the latest, there's the filter available that just removes everything else and just shows me the latest components used in that where used report. So there's enhancements to this where used table. Some customers prefer to have the where used backwards. So instead of showing the current assembly and the upper level assemblies at the bottom, some customers like to do it the other way around. So they'd want to show the component at the bottom and have the parent assemblies at the top on this table. That's still not possible to do with just the defaults, but TriStar has our developed apps that will format this where used table to look differently. So if you have run across this and you want the where used table to look a bit differently, let us know and we can help you set it up so it does look differently in Windchill. This not only applies to Windchill 11 M30, but any previous version of Windchill. So I thought I'd mention that in case you were not happy with how your where used table looked like. So another enhancement in Windchill 11 M30, and this does require Creo 4 M20 at least, so the current Creo 4 release. Right now we are at M20 as of today. M30 should be coming out in September. One of the enhancements is in the case of when I need to send some of the Creo files to a contractor who's modeling something for me, I need to take out these files out of Windchill, send them to that third party. They will modify the files, but now I need to bring those files back into Windchill. So I need to re-import it back into my workspace and resolve the changes between some of the parts that have changed. Some parts may not have changed. So the workgroup manager in Creo 4 will actually flag the parts, and there is a record kept within the metadata of the part to see whether it has changed or not. So when you're importing it, it will recognize whether there's been any geometry changes or feature changes within the part, or if it was just used as a placeholder, and give you the ability to select what you want to import versus what you want to keep the same. Right? So this is an enhancement to the import to workspace functionality in previous versions that's a lot more intelligent. There's other support in Creo, along with Creo 4 and Windchill 11 M30, support for better visualization of things like GD&T and PMI or model-based definition, those 3D dimensions on the parts. In Creo View, they will get displayed a lot cleaner than in previous versions of Windchill and Creo View. And other support for the additive manufacturing that has been added in Creo 4. So there's a new support for a new tray assembly, which is a manufacturing assembly inside of Windchill. There's also support for the new module in Creo called the Product Insight Extension. So now I can support this module as well as publish some of the callouts and some of that information into Windchill and visualize that in Creo View. PTC is also moving away for some of the web browsers from the plugins that are used in the web browser, namely the ActiveX plugins that Creo View always has been created as. Now the new format, the WebGL format, is being substituted for Creo View ActiveX. So a lot of the web browsers on the market, like Google Chrome, Firefox, they are moving slowly to eliminate any kind of plugin installs. So Creo View would not work in the future with those. So PTC is converting Creo View and these little thumbnail plugins and visualization plugins on the Windchill pages to support WebGL. And WebGL will also be compatible with tablets and phones because a lot of those support just the neutral HTML, Java-based WebGL technology. In Windchill M20 and M30, PTC is transitioning away from using the plugin and using WebGL instead. So if you are looking at a web page with some of the other browsers, then you're going to have the viewable appear without having to install an ActiveX plugin into your Windows system. Some custom companies don't allow installs of these plugins, so users cannot see those directly. WebGL will work natively within the web browser. The also other important things to note is in Windchill 11 M30, PTC has replaced the visualization bar within the product structure page to WebGL. So it can be used, now WebGL can be used without the Creo View plugin. You can still bring back Creo View plugin if you wish. The WebGL does have some features that are not yet supported, especially for different view states and things like this. But the plugin no longer requires you to install something on your Windows system. The defaults when you use different web browsers on that visualization tab now are going to be WebGL for Firefox, Chrome, and Microsoft Edge. So Microsoft Edge was not supported previously, or there was no full support for it. If you're using Windows 10 and you're using Microsoft Edge, you can now correctly display the the viewables inside of the Windchill pages, because now they're using WebGL technology. Internet Explorer is the only one that defaults to the old Creo View ActiveX plugin. But again, if you want to enable it to use the WebGL plugin by default for the users, you can just set a preference on the Windchill server to enable it that, instead of true, it would be false, and vice versa for the various browsers. Okay, so I'm going to go into now what support has been added to the Creo Unite Multi-CAD support inside of Windchill. So one of the things that was added in Windchill 11 M020 CATIA, SolidWorks, or Creo Elements Direct without requiring the workgroup manager for those CAD softwares. So this does not apply to drawings. It's only 3D models. So if I'm using a 3D model, I receive it from a customer, or I'm using it in my Creo assemblies as a placeholder, when I check it into Windchill alongside of the Creo files, now that model will get stored natively inside of Windchill. The Creo View CAD worker visualization server will create thumbnails for it, and I don't need to have that specific CAD software to put in those files into Windchill. Now, this is not the same as if I wanted to edit those files inside of that CAD software, because once it's in Windchill, Windchill's gonna assume that it came as part of the Creo assembly and will not allow me to open these files directly inside of this other CAD software. So in the case of if you need to use both CAD software to edit this file, Creo, and this source file, you would still use the workgroup manager for these softwares. But if you just receive these files from a customer, you're not editing them in any way, you're just referencing these in your assemblies, this is a nice way to put them into Windchill, so they're also now supported and revisioned and numbered and stored in the same database alongside of your Creo. Obviously, if there's any changes to those files, your customer sends you a new file with the Creo Unite collaboration extensions. You can update that file and check it in again, and it'll create another version of those files. So I want to just do a quick demo of some of those objects. So here I have, in my session, I have Creo 4 running. I have a small assembly of a few components. This is a shaver model that I made my handle in gold. But this is what I'm storing inside of Windchill. Some of the files inside of this Creo assembly, they're directly from Creo. Some of these files are from, one of these is from CATIA. Some of these assemblies have been created in CATIA. Some of these have been created inside of SolidWorks. So there's an assembly that I just imported directly from the SolidWorks versions. And there's a single part, which is just a motor that I got, but that one was modeled in Siemens NX. So they're natively stored inside of my assembly here, and in my workspace, will display these items as coming in from those different CAD softwares. So if I look at my table view to display, actually I'll choose this one here, to display those files, one of the things I can see in my table views are the names, the numbers of these different files, and I can turn on some columns in my tables. So for example, I'll create a new table view. I'll call this Demo Multi-CAD. And I'll look at the column display. One of the columns that I can add is the authoring application and authoring app version reference. One of the other columns I can add is the change status icon. I can also add related change notice column. So let me just do that on this new table view inside of my workspace. So I'll switch to my Demo Multi-CAD view. And one of the things I can see here is for some of these CATIA parts that I'm using in my assembly, I can see that these files are and they do have different icons, but these are coming from that software, but the authoring app reference column is showing me that this was a CATIA file, but it's been checked in through Creo, not checked in through CATIA itself. Right? But this is a CAD part, CAD product. It's the original file. Some of the same ones here also come in from SolidWorks and also from NX. The other ones are just coming in from Creo. So the workspace shows me that information. Some of the parts in my workspace, like for example, this CAD assembly, have a related change. So this part, this is a BREV. This one's being worked on, but this one resulted from a change notice. It was change notice 00001. So that was the number of that change notice. Right, so I can see now that information within my workspace. You cannot still click on that change notice and take a look at it. So that has not yet been created as a hyperlink, perhaps in future versions, but at least I can see that there was a change that necessitated a BREV. And of course, if I want to see that change, I can either search for the change notice up here in the search bar, or go into that assembly and look at what the related changes were. And then I can go in and look at that change directly on that part. So those are some of the new things that have been added to the workspace to see that information. So especially if I'm using these additional files, I don't need to have the workgroup manager to check them into Windchill. For files that are checked in through the workgroup manager, so the third-party workgroup managers, like SolidWorks, NX, and other files, the same columns So if I add, now this is showing my common space. So if I just add this assembly to my workspace, in this case it's a SolidWorks assembly of 3 parts. That one has been natively checked in by SolidWorks. So if I look at my workspace and take a look at those parts, now it's showing me specifically that it's been checked in. It's a SolidWorks application, but it's been checked in with SolidWorks 2015. So it hasn't been checked in by Creo, but it has been actually checked in by a SolidWorks version. So even though the icons, the files are exactly the same, the source is different, and the use cases are different. But this is what I can see. The Workgroup Manager also will support multiple versions. So if some users are using 2015, some users are using 2017, which is supported, this will show me what version of SolidWorks that came from, especially if you have different customers using different SolidWorks versions. So Windchill supports multiple versions as well. There's also this pull down here in the workspace called the featured object list. So right now it's showing me these items because I just added them to my workspace. So it automatically flagged them as featured objects. So these 3 assemblies are the only ones I've added to my workspace. It doesn't show me any other parts in the workspace, only the ones that I've added. So if I want to work on some of these, create some drawings off of them, it only shows me those parts. And there's this featured items object column, featured object status column that is shown. I can go back to the default and add additional parts to that featured status column. So maybe I want to add some of those parts within that assembly. I can just click on the star, or I can click multiple ones and go into the edit menu and click set as featured. So now when I set this view, show featured items only, right, only those parts are shown in my workspace. My workspace refreshes faster, the performance is a lot greater than having all those other parts in the workspace. And I don't have to scroll as much because I don't need to see the other parts. I'm just working on these ones, even though I have something else in my workspace. That's different than the third option. So if I put it back to default, the third option is top level objects only. So when I set top level objects, in this case it shows me the same objects because they are top levels that I've added, but it doesn't show me anything else. It just shows me those assemblies. But those two are different. Even though I selected the featured objects to be other parts, it only shows me the top level assemblies. Now there is also a column. So if I put it to the top level objects, there's also another column I can add that describes that top level object. So in my table views, there's an option called top level object. So if I hit finish and update my table view, for those 3 assemblies it should say yes. Even if I have more assemblies shown, so let's say I go back into the list view, it will show me that those other parts, sub-assemblies, they're not top level objects, but like for example this one is, and that's what's being filtered. So if you want to understand how it filters it and how it identifies these, you can also show a column that would show you that information. There is a new change task icon that's been added as well. So if I want to select an item and click change task on the item, I can associate this to a change notice as part of an implementation plan, and add that object to that item. So that's another option. I don't have time to go through that today. I wanted to also now get to some of the improvements in Creo View 4.1. So one of the improvements is the ability to support 3D textures. So if you're putting texture maps on your parts, you can display those now inside of Creo View. There is an option for your Creo View adapters that you need to select if it's not on by default to convert texture maps, but now you can load textures. You can also compare PDFs inside of Windchill as you would compare a drawing. So when you're loading a PDF through the Creo View viewer, you can select whether it's going to treat it as a regular document PDF or as essentially a CAD drawing. So with document PDFs, with documents, you cannot compare the two by overlaying them together. But with drawings in Windchill, you can. So if you have a lot of old drawings in the format of a PDF and there's different revs that are being created, you can do a comparison between the two, and it'll compare the vector information within the PDF as if it was a drawing. So that's a new option that's been created in Creo View. You can also now display the cable length parameter out of Creo. So if you're using cabling and you create some of these cables, it will calculate the total length for you and display it for each of those objects that you select in the tree or on the graphics area in Creo View with a cable length parameter. So that's calculated directly from Creo View. In Creo 4, with instrumented assemblies, you can now publish them and visualize them in Creo View 4.1. So you'll see similar information that's coming in from the new module inside of Creo 4. There's other versions that have been added in terms of support for Creo View and creating visuals, especially some of the new releases of SOLIDWORKS. 2018, it's going to be planned to be supported in the future patch of Windchill 11, as well as support for Office 2016 once that gets certified, and support for some of the ECAD software. Currently, these are the ones supported, and that's the support that's been added in 11.0 M030. For Creo View 4.1, I've had some customers who were not able to run it. Creo View 4.1 requires a new license server. So if you're at least on Creo 4 M10, you should already have that license server installed because that's required. But if you're not, if you're on a previous Creo 3 version, you need to update your FlexNet PTC license server to at least 11.14 because the new Creo 4 and Creo 4.1 license keys would not be compatible with the older versions of the FlexNet server. So that's something to note. If you get an error saying no such feature exists when you're running, or if you get something like the license is not compatible, it's the license server that needs to be updated if you're still running an older version of FlexNet. So let me get into and take a look at some Creo View information on some of these assemblies. So I'll open up that top-level shaver product inside of Creo View. So let me get into the page inside of Windchill for that assembly and open this inside of Creo View. This is going directly into the servers through another application, so it it does need me to log in, the same as if we were to log in through a web browser. Inside of Creo View, I see the information about my assembly. One of the things that's been added in later versions of Creo View is the ability to show things like a floor on the model. Right? So there's different view types, but you know, if I want to show this in a certain orientation, and just minimize this a bit, I can show that inside of Creo View. So there's various settings for varying the floor. I like just the lines setting. I can change different planes. So right now I'm looking at the Z, but maybe I can look at the Y instead. So my floor would, kind of similar to Creo, would just align itself to a different orientation. And I can change the lighting style in Creo View to see the product a bit better in that style. So that's in the case of if I'm modeling with this product. I have an exploded state inside of Creo that I created. So that exploded state comes into Creo View for me. So I can just go into it and explode out the components just like I had them in Creo View, Creo Parametric, rather. There's also new options. If I go into my options inside of my Creo View environment, there's now the ability to use alternate part names and the ability to add additional columns to my Creo View column list, the Creo View tree. So here I've added some extra columns that show me not only just the name of the part as it was published, but the part number. There's one that I took out which is the same as the name, the PTC common name. I'm also showing the life cycle state for some of these. So for some of these assemblies, they might be in a different life cycle state. So I can show that information directly inside of my tree here. So I think most of these are in work, but I can see additional information also on the authoring app. So where did this other file come from? In this case, it's showing me that some of these files came from other CAD systems. They do have different numbering. That might have been the customer numbering that they've used. So I'm showing that directly in the tree as a part number, not only just the file name that comes in by default. So these additional columns, I believe they were introduced in the Creo View 4 or 3.1, so a couple, one or two releases back. But now I can see that information as I'm selecting parts through a tree. You can add additional columns, right? Things like descriptions, materials, any parameter Creo View, you can show that parameter inside of these columns. So selecting items just becomes a lot easier, and visualizing items becomes a lot easier inside of Creo View. Okay, so that's some of the enhancements that I wanted to go over in today's presentation, especially in Creo 4 data management and Creo View 4.1. So I'm going to just take the next few minutes to see if there's any questions. And in the meantime, if you do want to ask a question, you can type that into your chat box in the GoToMeeting interface. And this webinar is being recorded, so you will be able to access it for playback purposes and share it with others that may be interested in. If you have any other comments or suggestions for future webinars you'd like to see in Windchill, maybe some modules that you'd like us to get into, just let us know. You can type it in the chat as well, and we'd be happy to, if there's enough interest for those, we'd be happy to take a look at those in future webinars. So there's a couple of questions. First one was, does the top level object list work for third-party CAD files? Yes, it does. So the top level object will be scanned for those if you're using the workgroup manager for those CAD files. If you're just uploading them as documents, no. But if you're using the workgroup manager, that should recognize what's a top level or not. Another question was if we update to the new license server, does the license file need to be updated? No, so the license server is backwards compatible. So if you're using Creo View 3 or previous versions, you don't need to update the license. For those softwares, you can just do the license server. But because the licensing structure has been changed in newer versions, that's why you need the new license server. But no, you don't need, you can install the new license server if you wish, if you just want to use Creo View 4, but if you're using Creo Parametric 3, you don't need new licenses for that. Just the old one should be fine. Although when you request the license pack from PTC, for one of your licenses, you'll get updated licenses for all your licenses. So you really can't pick and choose. They'll just give you a new license pack for everything. So you might, if you're on maintenance, you still might get a license for Creo 4, but you could still use Creo 3, Creo 2, and so on. Okay, I don't see any other questions in the queue, so I want to thank you for your time, and have a great day, everyone, and look forward to our next webinars coming up this quarter and moving forward. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.